Dominic's tiny hand tightened around Owen's calloused fingers the moment they stepped onto the glossy marble floors of the mansion. The sound of laughter and clinking champagne glasses echoing through the grand halls above. "Are we gonna clean all this, Dad?" Dominic whispered, eyes wide as he stared up at the glittering chandelier. Owen Wells gave his 6-year-old son a soft smile and nodded. "Not all of it, just downstairs. You'll stay with me the whole time, all right?" Dominic nodded, gripping tighter as they followed the catering manager through a side hallway into the kitchen, where carts of empty glasses waited to be cleared. This wasn't Owen's usual shift. Normally, he worked commercial buildings offices, warehouses, but this gig paid double. One night, one rich guy's party, and it'd be enough to cover next month's rent and maybe even get Dominic a new pair of shoes that didn't have duct tape on the soles. The mansion was ridiculous. Gold trim, velvet drapes. It looked like something out of a movie. The kind of place Owen used to joke about owning back when life hadn't knocked him sideways. He pulled on his gloves, handed Dominic a coloring book and a granola bar, and got to work stacking trays. Upstairs, Olivia Ward was bored out of her mind. She leaned against the mahogany railing of the balcony overlooking the ballroom. A glass of untouched wine in her hand, watching guests, she didn't care about pretending to enjoy a party she didn't want to throw. Technically, it wasn't her party. It was just at her house. Well, her estate. Being the sole heir of a multi-million-dollar real estate empire had its perks, but it also came with strings. Like hosting fundraisers to keep up appearances, entertaining men her stepmother tried to set her up with, and smiling through conversations with people who only cared about her last name. She was over it. "Olivia, darling," came the overly sweet voice of her stepmother, Marlene, appearing beside her in a cloud of overpriced perfume. "You haven't said a word to Carter. He's been waiting for an introduction all night." "I'm not interested in Carter," Olivia replied flatly. "Well, you're not getting any younger, and Carter's family owns half of." "I said I'm not interested." She turned, leaving the balcony and the party behind. She slipped through the crowd, heels clicking against the polished floors, and ducked into the back wing of the house where the noise faded to silence. The quiet was a relief. But as she turned the corner toward the service hallway, she nearly walked straight into someone. A man. Tall, rugged in a way that didn't belong in this house. He was carrying a stack of trays, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, jaw clenched in focus. She froze. He didn't notice her at first. Not until one of the trays shifted and he cursed under his breath, catching it just before it crashed to the floor. "Need help?" Olivia asked before she could stop herself. The man looked up. His eyes were tired, deep brown like they'd seen a lot more than they should have, and yet, when they landed on her, something flickered. Not recognition, not interest, just curiosity. "I'm good," he said gruffly. "Thanks." She watched him for a second, then noticed a little boy sitting on an upside-down bucket in the corner, legs swinging, humming to himself while scribbling something in a coloring book. "Your son?" she asked. The man hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, Dominic." Olivia smiled, stepping closer. "Hey there." Dominic looked up, blinked at her, then returned to coloring. "Hi," he mumbled. She turned back to the man. "I'm Olivia." He nodded once. "Owen." "Nice to meet you, Owen. You work for the catering company." "Janitorial." He shifted slightly, clearly uncomfortable with the conversation. "Just picking up a few extra shifts." Olivia tilted her head, intrigued. He didn't look like someone who belonged here, but somehow he didn't look out of place either. Not with how confidently he moved, not with how protective he was of his son. "Are you always this friendly with strangers in the basement of your own party?" he asked suddenly. She laughed, only the interesting ones. Owen couldn't stop thinking about her all night. She disappeared after their brief exchange, but her face kept flashing in his head while he scrubbed countertops and packed up trash bags. He hadn't known she was the host. She didn't carry herself like one. No fake smile, no designer attitude, just real. And he hadn't expected her to talk to him, let alone look at him like he wasn't invisible. By the time they finished the cleanup, it was close to midnight. Dominic was asleep in a chair, arms wrapped around his jacket like a blanket. Owen hoisted him gently into his arms and carried him through the side entrance toward the staff parking lot. That's when he saw her again. Olivia stood by the front steps, barefoot now, heels dangling from one hand. Her eyes caught his as he passed. "You're still here," she said. "Just finished." "You don't have a cars." Owen shifted Dominic's weight in his arms. "Bus stops a 10-minute walk. We'll be fine." Olivia frowned. "Wait." She disappeared inside and came back seconds later with a key fob. She opened the passenger door of a sleek black SUV and looked at him. "I'll drive you." Owen stared at her. "You don't have to." "I know I don't. I want to." The ride was quiet, but not awkward. Dominic dozed in the back seat, and Olivia stole glances at Owen out of the corner of her eye. He was handsome, in a raw, unpolished way. Nothing like the men she usually met at galas or charity events. There was something about him that made her feel normal. When they reached the small apartment complex on the east side of town, Olivia parked and turned to him. "Thanks for letting me drive." "Thanks for offering," he said, clearly unused to someone doing something nice for him. She hesitated, then reached into the center console and pulled out a business card. "If you ever need extra work or just want to talk, call me." Owen took it slowly. "You always give your number to janitors." She smiled, "Only the interesting ones." He laughed just barely, but it was real. As he stepped out, she watched him walk toward the building, Dominic resting against his shoulder. She didn't know what had just happened, but she wanted to find out. The next morning, Owen stared at the business card on the kitchen counter like it was a puzzle he didn't know how to solve. It had been wedged in his back pocket when he'd changed into his uniform before sunrise. He hadn't remembered putting it there. But now, in the soft light of early morning, it looked out of place on the chipped laminate surface beside a bowl of cereal and a pair of little sneakers missing their laces. Dominic sat on the floor, building something with mismatched blocks, humming to himself between bites of banana. Owen watched him for a moment, then picked up the card and slid it into the drawer beneath the sink without a word. He had work to get to. By the time the afternoon sun dipped low enough to turn the city gold, Owen was hauling a mop bucket into the lobby of a downtown office building, sweat clinging to his back beneath his uniform shirt. The job was quiet, the kind that kept his hands busy and his mind off everything else. But Olivia's voice kept slipping in anyway. That low, steady tone, the way she'd looked at him like she wasn't seeing the uniform or the calloused hands, but something else entirely. Something he wasn't used to being seen for. He shook it off and kept working. 2 days passed. Then 3. By the 4th, Dominic had caught a cold. Nothing serious, but enough to make him clingy and restless. Owen called in a favor from his neighbor, an older woman down the hall who sometimes watched Dominic when shifts ran late. Just before he left for work, Dominic looked up at him, voice stuffy and eyes watery. "Will you be home before bed?" Owen crouched beside him, brushing damp hair off his forehead. "I'll try, buddy, but if not, I'll be there when you wake up." "You promise?" "I do." He didn't make it back in time. The building he was assigned to had a broken elevator, and the stairwells were packed with boxes from some law firm's move-in. It took twice as long to finish, and by the time he got home, Dominic was already asleep on the couch, wrapped in a blanket with half a tissue box beside him. Owen sat on the floor next to him, resting his head back against the couch cushions, exhaustion sinking deep into his bones. It was after midnight when he finally opened the drawer and looked at the card again. He didn't call the number. But the next morning, he showed up at the mansion. Not as staff. As himself. The front gate security guard gave him a suspicious look until Owen explained who he was there to see. A quick call was made, and a moment later, the gate buzzed open. He walked up the long drive slowly, feeling like he didn't belong with every step. The woman who opened the front door wasn't Olivia. She was older, with sharp eyes and a tight bun, dressed in a silk blouse and a necklace that looked like it cost more than Owen's monthly expenses. "Yes," she said, voice clipped. "I'm looking for Olivia." "She's not available," the woman replied, already preparing to close the door. But behind her, Olivia's voice drifted in. "It's all right, Marlene, let him in." The woman stepped aside, clearly displeased, but said nothing. Olivia appeared at the top of the staircase, barefoot again, wearing jeans and a slate-colored sweater that looked soft enough to sleep in. She descended with a calm ease that made Owen feel like the floor beneath him wasn't entirely solid. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said. "I wasn't sure either." They stood in the grand foyer, the kind of place that could make anyone feel small. But Olivia didn't look at him like he was out of place. She looked at him like she'd been waiting. "Is your son all right?" she asked gently. "Yeah, a bit of a cold. He's resting." She nodded. "I have a garden, want a walk." He followed her through a side corridor and out into a carefully manicured space where tall hedges shielded them from the rest of the estate. The path curved along a koi pond and a row of lemon trees. The air smelled like spring. "I didn't come here to ask for anything," Owen said after a long silence. "I didn't think you had." He trailed off, unsure how to explain the pull that had brought him here. Olivia stopped walking and turned to face him. "You don't owe me an explanation." He met her eyes. "Then why did you give me that card?" She tilted her head slightly, considering. "Because you looked like someone who carries everything on his own, and sometimes that gets heavy." Owen exhaled slowly. "I'm not used to people noticing." "That's not your fault." He ran a hand through his hair, uncertain. "You live in a different world, Olivia. I'm not trying to sound dramatic, but look around." She glanced at the marble benches, the sparkling water, the flawless symmetry of the place. Then she looked back at him. "You think I belong in this world? You were born here. And you think that gives me a choice?" She folded her arms, her expression unreadable. "I didn't build any of this, but I live in it, and it doesn't feel like mine." Owen didn't know what to say to that. She stepped closer, voice quieter now. "You're the first person in a long time who's talked to me like I wasn't part of the furniture." "I didn't mean to cross a line." "You didn't." They stood there, silence stretching between them, not uncomfortable but charged, like something unspoken was pressing against the air. Then Olivia spoke again. "Would Dominic like to come next time?" He blinked. "Here. There's a treehouse in the south garden. He might like it." Owen hesitated. "You don't have to." "I know I don't. I want to." He watched her, trying to understand what this was. Not pity, not charity, something else entirely. Finally, he nodded. "I think he'd love that." She smiled, not wide but real. And in that moment, Owen realized something he hadn't expected. He wanted to see her smile again. The next time Owen brought Dominic to the estate, it was a Saturday morning wrapped in soft sun and birdsong. He'd been hesitant, uncertain how to explain to a 6-year-old that they were going to visit the woman who had once hosted a party in a house big enough to hold their entire apartment complex. But Dominic had only asked one question: will she be there? Owen had nodded. That was enough. They arrived at the back gate, where a different guard checked his name on a clipboard and waved them through without a word. Olivia was already outside, kneeling beside a flower bed, her sleeves pushed up and her hands covered in soil. She looked up as they approached, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "You're early," she said, standing and dusting her palms on her jeans. "Didn't want to miss the treehouse," Owen replied. Dominic tugged on his sleeve. "Where is it?" Olivia pointed through a hedge-lined path. "That way, just past the orchard. There's a swing, too." Owen looked down at his son. "Stay where she can see you, all right." Dominic nodded, then ran off, his backpack bouncing against his back. Owen turned back to Olivia. "You built that for him." "It's been there since I was a kid," she said, watching the path where Dominic had disappeared. "But it was falling apart, so I had it reinforced yesterday. Thought he might like it." "You could have just told me no." "I didn't want to." They walked slowly toward the garden, where the rosemary and mint grew wild along the edges of the stone path. Olivia glanced sideways at him. "What was he like as a baby?" Owen blinked, caught off guard. "Loud, never slept, always wanted to be held." She smiled. "Sounds like you were a good dad." "I tried to be." They reached a wrought iron bench under a willow tree, the leaves trailing like curtains around them. He sat, elbows resting on his knees. "You said this place doesn't feel like it's yours," he said. "Why stay?" She exhaled, "Because leaving means giving it to them." "Your family." "My stepmother, her lawyers, everyone who thinks I'm just a placeholder until I marry someone they approve of." "You could walk away." "And then what?" She looked at him, her expression unreadable. "There's no version of my life where I just vanish into a studio apartment and sell scarves online. I've tried to picture it, but this place, it's tied to everything." Owen nodded slowly. "And the people who come here, like the ones from that party. They don't see me, just the estate, my last name, the inheritance. No one ever asks if I want any of it." He leaned back, looking up through the willow branches. "I used to think people with money had it all figured out. And I was wrong." A laugh escaped her, short but genuine. "You're not like anyone I've ever met." "I get that a lot," he said dryly. She pulled her legs up onto the bench, sitting cross-legged. "You don't ask for anything. You don't pretend. You didn't care that I was barefoot in a hallway or that I didn't want to be at my own party." "I cared, just not in the way you think." She studied him for a long moment. "What way then?" "I cared why you were alone." Silence settled between them, but it wasn't empty. It hummed with something heavier, something unsaid. From the garden path, Dominic's voice rang out, "Dad, there's a ladder." Owen stood, calling back, "Be careful." Olivia remained seated, watching the boy dart across the lawn. "He likes it here." "He likes anywhere he can climb." "He'll be safe." "I know." They stood in the shade for a while longer, neither of them rushing to fill the air. When Dominic finally returned, his cheeks were flushed and his curls damp with sweat. "I saw a lizard," he announced, dropping onto the grass. Owen handed him a water bottle from his backpack. "Did you name it?" Dominic nodded solemnly. "Trevor." Olivia crouched beside him. "Trevor the lizard, that's a solid name." Dominic grinned, clearly pleased. Later, as they prepared to leave, Olivia pulled Owen aside near the gate. "I have a dinner next week," she said. "It's not a fundraiser, just small, a few people I trust." He raised a brow. "And you're inviting me?" "I'm asking you." He looked down at his shoes. "I don't exactly own anything that fits in here." "I'll take care of it." "I'm not some project, Olivia." Her gaze didn't flinch. "I know, that's not what this is." He nodded once. "All right, I'll come." As he and Dominic walked back to the car, Olivia stood at the edge of the drive, watching them go. She wasn't sure what had shifted, but something had. And this time, she wasn't going to let it slip away. The valet glanced up as Owen stepped out of the car, adjusting the stiff collar of the tailored navy button-down he hadn't paid for. He hadn't wanted to accept the clothes Olivia had sent, but after she'd quietly arranged for a personal stylist to stop by his apartment, who'd somehow also brought a pair of proper dress shoes in exactly his size, he knew arguing would have been pointless. She didn't do things halfway. "Nice wheels," the valet said casually, eyeing the sleek black sedan. "Not mine," Owen replied, handing over the keys Olivia had insisted he use for the evening. "Just borrowing the dream for a night." He took a breath and approached the front entrance of the smaller guest house where Olivia was hosting the dinner. The main estate loomed in the distance behind a row of trees, but tonight's event was intimate, tucked away, with soft golden light spilling through the windows and the scent of roasted garlic drifting on the breeze. Inside, the dining room was warm, candlelit, with no more than a dozen guests seated around a long wooden table. It wasn't the cold opulence of the previous party, it was cozy, lived in, and for the first time, Owen could see a version of Olivia that wasn't weighed down by the expectations of her last name. She stood at the far end of the room, laughing at something an older man in a worn brown blazer was saying. Her hair was down, simple and loose, and when she spotted Owen, her expression shifted, not surprised, not relieved but quietly certain, like she'd known he would come. "You made it," she said as she reached him. "You sent a car, and a driver. Felt like I didn't have much of a choice." Her lips curved. "You still could have said no." He glanced around. "Is this your real life, or just the version you let people see?" "It's the part I choose," she said simply. They moved to join the others, and Olivia introduced him without pretense. No one raised an eyebrow. No one asked impolite questions. It was as if she'd already made it clear Owen was someone who mattered. The food was incredible grilled sea bass with lemon butter, roasted root vegetables, fresh bread still warm in the basket, and Owen tried not to feel self-conscious when someone asked about his work. Olivia didn't jump in to defend him or explain. She let him speak, let his voice carry its own weight. After dinner, a few guests wandered toward the music room, where someone began playing a quiet jazz melody on the grand piano. Owen lingered beside the fireplace, watching the flames reflect in a glass sculpture on the mantel. "You look like you're trying to disappear," Olivia said, appearing beside him with 2 glasses of scotch. "Just soaking air in." She handed him a glass. "You don't have to be grateful." "I'm not. I'm just trying to make sure I don't say the wrong thing and knock over a $5,000 vase." Olivia laughed. "That one's actually from a flea market in Lisbon. Cost me $40 and a sunburn." He looked at her, really looked. "Why me?" Her fingers tapped lightly against the glass. "You carry things like you're the only one who can. I know what that feels like." "What do you want from this?" "I don't know yet," she admitted, "but I know I don't want to stop seeing you." He looked down at the drink in his hand, then back at her. "I don't belong here." "You didn't belong at that party," she said, stepping closer, "but you belong here with me." That stopped him. "I'm not good at this," he said after a pause. "I've been in survival mode for years. I don't know how to let someone else in." You don't have to know, she said quietly. You just have to try. He didn't kiss her that night. Not yet. But he stood with her under the garden lights until the last guest had gone, and when he left, her fingers lingered on his for a long second before letting go. Over the next few weeks, things shifted. Owen started bringing Dominic by the estate more often. The boy had memorized the path to the treehouse, and Olivia made sure it was stocked with apple juice and adventure books. One afternoon, she came out carrying a small canvas wrapped in twine and handed it to Dominic. "What's this?" he asked, eyes wide. "Open it." Inside was a painting messy, bright, and unmistakably his. She'd taken one of his drawings and had it reimagined on canvas by a children's illustrator she knew. Dominic looked up at her. "You made this." "I had it made because I think you're a better artist than you think." Owen stared at it, then at her. "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to," she said, repeating the words that were becoming her signature. Later that night, after Dominic had fallen asleep in the back seat during the ride home, Owen carried him up the stairs and tucked him in. As he stepped out into the hallway, something shifted in his chest, a tug he couldn't ignore. He grabbed his phone. When she answered, her voice was soft, almost drowsy. "Hey." "I keep trying to find a reason to push you away," he said, barely breathing. "But I can't." "You don't need a reason. I think maybe I'm ready to stop running." There was a pause and then stop. The next time they met, he kissed her. It wasn't planned, it wasn't perfect, but it was real. It happened in the middle of the kitchen, while Dominic was outside picking flowers for the cook. Olivia was showing Owen how to use her ancient espresso machine, laughing as he burned himself slightly on the steam nozzle. She turned, and he caught her before she could finish her sentence. It was gentle at first, then deeper, a confession without words. When they broke apart, she whispered, "That took you long enough." "I'm a slow learner." "You're not slow, you're careful." He rested his forehead against hers. "I don't want to mess this up." "You won't." The following Friday, Olivia arrived at the apartment unannounced, holding a small envelope and a folded contract. "I want to show you something," she said. Owen let her in, and she handed him the papers. He scanned them quickly, frowning. "This is for a house." "It's not a gift," she said quickly. "It's a project. You pick the property, I front the renovation costs, you do the work, we sell it, or you keep it. Either way, it's yours." "Why?" "Because this is what you're good at, because I believe in you, and because I want to build something with you." He looked at her, stunned silent. "Say something," she whispered. "You just changed my life." "No," she said, reaching up to touch his cheek. "You did. I just gave you the place to do it." They stood there, in the middle of his small living room, surrounded by peeling paint and paperbacks. And for the first time in years, Owen didn't feel like he was waiting for something to fall apart. He kissed her again, this time with certainty. 3 months later, the house was finished. Dominic picked the blue for the front door. Olivia planted lemon trees in the backyard. And one late summer evening, under string lights and paper lanterns, surrounded by the few people who mattered, Owen Wells married the woman who had seen him when no one else did. He didn't have to clean up after anyone that night. He just had to dance with the woman he loved, and the son who would never again wonder if they belonged. The new house was finished by early fall. Not just renovated, transformed. Owen had poured himself into every corner. The reclaimed oak beams in the ceiling, the sunken living room with its hand-laid tile, the deep window sills that Dominic liked to curl up in with a book. Olivia had wandered through it the first time without saying anything, only trailing her fingers along the edges of the walls like she was letting them tell her a secret. The house wasn't enormous, and it didn't need to be. It felt like breath, like space they'd earned. Their mornings found rhythm. Olivia, usually the first to wake, made coffee in the sun-washed kitchen. Owen would emerge barefoot, hair still damp from the shower, with Dominic padding in behind him looking for waffles and asking questions about the cloud shapes outside. It wasn't glamorous, but it was theirs. One morning, as Dominic recited facts about toucans from his cereal box, Owen leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "You're serious about stepping back from the company?" he asked. Olivia didn't hesitate. "I'm already doing it. The board's adjusted, and I've appointed someone I trust to run the day-to-day. I still own it, but don't have to be the face of it." "You spent your whole life building that identity." "I spent my whole life being told who I was. Now get to decide." He watched her slide a piece of toast onto a plate, her movements sure, calm. "So what do you want to be?" he asked. She turned, holding his gaze. "Yours." The words landed like an arrow, to the chest quiet but undeniable. That night, after Dominic had fallen asleep with a flashlight under the covers, Olivia stood out on the back porch, wrapped in one of Owen's flannel shirts. "I've been thinking about your dad," she said softly. Owen came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "What about him?" "You said he left before you were born. Do you ever wonder what he'd think if he saw you now?" He rested his chin on her shoulder. "I used to, but not anymore." "Why not?" "Because I'm not him. I stayed. I didn't run, and I've got everything I ever wanted standing right here." She turned to face him. "You really mean that?" "I've never meant anything more." She pressed her hand against his chest, feeling the steady beat beneath her fingers. "Then, let's stop waiting." "For what?" "For some perfect time, for everything to be settled. We already have what matters." He took her hand and brought it to his lips. "Then marry me, again, just us this time." She stared back at him, not shocked but moved. "Here. Here, under these stars, with Dominic holding the rings and no one else telling us how it's supposed to look." Tears sprang to her eyes, but she nodded. "Yes." The ceremony was 3 days later. They held it beneath the old oak tree at the edge of the property, branches heavy with turning leaves. Dominic wore a navy vest and carried the rings in a wooden box he'd painted himself. Olivia wore a soft linen dress that moved like wind. Owen had on the same shirt she'd first seen him in, cleaned, pressed, but still him. There were no guests, no speeches, just vows whispered like promises only they were meant to hear. "I didn't know what home meant until you," Olivia said, fingers trembling as she slid the ring onto his hand. "I didn't believe in second chances," Owen replied. "Not until you gave me one." They kissed, and Dominic cheered, clapping wildly before racing toward them and wrapping his arms around both of their legs. Later that evening, they had dinner on a blanket in the backyard. Roasted chicken, fresh bread, and a lemon tart Olivia had learned to make just for the occasion. As the sun dipped low and the cicadas began their evening song, Owen pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. "I wasn't sure when the right moment would be," he said, "but I think this is it." Olivia opened the box slowly. Inside was a pendant, a tiny silver sculpture of a treehouse, delicate and unmistakably modeled after the one Dominic loved. Her eyes welled up. "You had this made?" "For you, for us." "I don't need a symbol of what we've built. I already live in it. But I want you to have something to hold when can't be near you." She leaned in, her voice a whisper. "You're never far, not anymore." As night fell, they lay back on the blanket, Dominic asleep beside them, curled up with a stuffed toucan he'd named Trevor Jr. The stars blinked overhead, scattered across the sky like a promise. Owen reached for Olivia's hand, lacing their fingers together. You ever think about how strange it is, he said. How one night, one shift, one conversation can change everything. She tilted her head toward him. It didn't change everything, it revealed what was possible. He turned to look at her, eyes soft. You were the possibility it didn't see coming. And you were the reality I didn't know I needed. They watched the sky until the air turned cool and the breeze carried the scent of earth and pine. Then together, they lifted Dominic and walked back inside, closing the door behind them not just on the night, but on the lives they'd left behind. From that moment on, they didn't live for survival. They lived for each other. And they never let go again.